So this dance is happening all the time, right? It's this unyielding, unfolding of divine consciousness, right? But we just don't recognize it, right? It's veiled from us. So that whole invitation is to explore what is it that wakes us up to this? What is that process of recognizing what's actually here and then being able to live as this from this recognition? Okay. So I want to tell a little story. Some of you in the room have heard this story, but it really shares, for me, a powerful expression of what the lineage of teachers in the Kashmir Shaivite understanding, how this information gets transmitted, okay? So when I was in grad school, Jim was in grad school 26 years ago, I guess now, we met and he took full liberty to grab me after our first long lunch encounter, 4 hours of conversation. And this was on the street in Chapel Hill, and he grabs me and he kisses me. And I'm like, all right, okay. Just out of another relationship. And I was like, okay, I don't know who this guy is. But just kidding. So lovely kiss. But in that kiss, I had this experience of this huge ball of white light that shot down my spine. And it was not anything I'd ever experienced before. This was not my first kiss. And this was a completely different order. Okay. So something was transmitted in that kiss. And, you know, and I've always had a little bit of a mystical leaning, so it didn't scare me. I was curious about what that was. Interesting, a couple nights later in the dream space, I have this numinous dream, and it's kind of has the quality of like a grainy old school film strip, you know, where it's not really clear, distinct lines. And so I have this vision in the dream space, and I'm sitting on the lap of this Indian guy. Never seen him, had no context for his face or anything like this. We're in a city park, sitting on his lap on this bench, I guess, or picnic table. And he says, "Don't worry, I'll hold your hand until you turn to light." I'm like, well, thank you, sir. Like, I have no context, no idea. So so the next morning I wake up and I'm telling Jimbo about when I talked to him about this dream. And he brings me this picture of his teacher, of Muktananda. And I'm like, that's the guy. And I'd never seen his face. I knew nothing about him. But he completely, so this lineage transpired through the dream space. Now, a few nights later, there was another dream that happens. And this was more, again, in the liminal space, not in deep sleep dreaming, but I'm seeing this yogi, and he's nothing but bones, literally just skeleton, sitting in meditation in a dark, like pitch black cave, right? And I'm hearing the word, which I'd never heard before, Navriti, 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 Navriti. So I'm hearing this over and over and over again. Like, I got nothing, right? So tell Jimbo, like, I had this dream, and here's this yogi sitting in a cave, and he's all bones. And I'm hearing this word, Navriti, Navriti, Navriti. So turns out that this experience of Navriti, so Navritinath was Yaneshwar's brother.
The poet
saint we just quoted. Navritinath was Yaneshwar's brother and was Yaneshwar's guru. Yeah. And Navritinath had received his initiation also in a dream from his guru, which was, make sure I say this right, to honor the names, Guru Gahininath, in another dream. And Guru Gahininath was part of a group of 9 high tantric masters. I got nothing. Like, I'm a Southern girl at Chapel Hill, like, I know none of this. And I share this because it's this really amazing understanding that these lineages of clarity and wakefulness have coherence and they have intentionality. And it is not some random discovery. That in these processes, in this particular tantric lineage, Kashmir Shaivism, there is a certain process that unfolds that has a specific signature of wisdom and understanding. Does that make sense to you guys as you hear that? Remember, we're back in the land of mystery, so if it's blowing the mind a little bit, please
Slide, please.
do well.
Yeah, so this is Nivritinath, and he took what's called Sanjivan Samadhi. So he placed himself in a cave and intentionally let his life come to an end, what's called dropping the body. He knew it was his time. So when Kimberly saw this image of a skeleton seated in the lotus posture in a cave, this was a representation of the way he ended his life that she knew nothing about. So there's a process that Kimberly's describing, both for herself and Nivritinath receiving his initiation from his teacher in a dream. There's a specific name in this tradition for this, which is called Shaktipat, which means the descent of Shakti, or the descent of grace is often the word that is used. And this is described in great detail in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition, this type of transmission. In fact, there's 27 levels of Shaktipat that are described in the Kashmiri Shaivite tradition, but this is not in any way unique to Kashmir Shaivism. So Jesus receiving his initiation from John the Baptist, it's described as a light descending into Jesus. The Quakers, why are they called the Quakers? Because they would have an awakening energy and their bodies would quake. The same with the Holy Rollers. We see, infinite numbers of examples of an awakening process, and it shows up in many, many different ways. Shaktipat in the Kashmir Shaivite tradition is described as usually having two main phases or events. The first is some process that places us on an intentional spiritual path. When we get to some point in our life when we realize what I really want to know is what's the nature of reality, or what is really true, or what does the word God mean, or anything like that, where we realize, okay, there's a mystery here and I want to know about it. And that's what I'm about, is I'm going to do that. That's the first phase of Shaktipat. And then usually along the way, there is some other event that makes this more dramatically clear to us that we are on this path. So there's usually at least two events in our lives, if we're on a spiritual path, that would be related to what we call Shaktipat. There are a lot of, next slide. So you're probably all familiar with the way that Kundalini, Shaktipat is actually the awakening of the Kundalini energy, the energy that is described as dormant within us until this awakening process begins, until that initial awakening process begins, a potential energy that we all have. And as it begins to awaken, as it moves through us, then there literally is, a lighting up of the energy centers along what's called the subtle body, that corresponds to the physical body, but is the body of energy or of light within the physical body. And this is all the descriptions that we have in culture. There's lots of descriptions of Kundalini and chakras and all of this. All of these derive from the tantric tradition. If you go back to where did this enter into culture, it started from the tantric traditions that we're describing. Although there are a lot of, different events that happen as the Kundalini unfolds, as this energy unfolds. This is not, when we use the word Kundalini, we're describing the same power that we've been describing all along, of this dynamic, powerful, vibrating energy. As it moves in us and wakes up, then a lot of changes can happen. Sometimes the movement of our breath will change. These are called kriyas. Kriya simply means movement. These are spontaneous movements of this energy as it moves through us. So our breathing pace can change. Sometimes it'll seem that our breathing will stop altogether for a little while. So if we can be safe with that, nothing bad will happen. There are physical movements that can happen. There are what are called mudras, or our hands or our limbs may assume a certain sort of shape or form temporarily. a variety of changes. A lot of visions happen. So this portrayal of these energy centers, often people will have visions of these energy centers and many other types of visions, the dreams that Kimberly had that she already described. So this can manifest in essentially infinite forms. Ultimately, what comes about through this awakening process is that our identity changes. That's the fundamental change that ultimately we come to. Our identity changes from being identified as a single individual person to being identified as being this conscious awake energy. That's how we realize I am one with an expression of this divine awakening energy.